Hey everyone, and welcome to my first ever Patreon exclusive Q&A/monthly update video. I'm still not sure exactly what I want to call this, but some combination of those words. If you don't know, I recently announced that I wanted to do more stuff for the Patreon, and part of that was doing more updates, telling you what I'm up to, and also doing a sort of monthly Q&A post where I let you ask me whatever you want, and I answer it on video. And so I basically wanted to combine those two ideas together and do a sort of monthly recap of the previous month, talking about what I did, what I want to do in the future, and also just answering any questions that you might have. So if you look at the timestamps or chapters of this video, you'll see that it's basically split up into two parts. The first half will be a Q&A where I'll answer any of the questions that you had in that previous post that I put up. And then the second half will be just a sort of monthly recap talking about what I did this month, what I want to do next month, and just sort of how the channel's going. And I want to basically continue this video series every month to keep you guys more in the loop on what's happening and also just give some more interactivity. So you can just always have, any questions that you want answered as timely as I possibly can. The first question is from Eric Hollow, longtime supporter of the channel. How big of a part is music in your life? If it is, what is an album/piece of music that lately you have particularly enjoyed? Music is probably not as big a part of my life as it is for most people, just because I do not ever just listen to music. I very rarely find myself just sitting back and listening to an album. I almost never, even if there's an artist I really, really like, it takes a lot for me to just sit down and oh, they have new music out, I'm just gonna listen to that and see what I think. I basically never do that at all. Any music that I listen to is entirely auxiliary. It's a secondary thing. It's almost like putting something up in my second monitor just to have something to listen to while I'm working or while I'm doing anything. Fun fact, actually, while I'm recording these videos, I have headphones on, and the headphones are not connected to my computer or to my recording software. I can't hear my own microphone input. That's not what these are for. I am just listening to music right now. Because recording in my living room, there's a lot of echo, and it really, I don't know, weirds me out. I have a weird anxiety about recording, and recording in just a silent room is really weird. So I actually just pump music. I'm just listening to future funk, the same sort of genre of music I put in the background of my videos, while I record these videos, just because it helps me speak a little bit louder and a little bit more, energetically without feeling self-conscious about it. But yeah, that's the most music that I listen to is background noise for a lot of stuff. I have a really hard time just listening to new albums or checking music out or listening to music as its own activity, which I feel has limited my taste in music, or I feel I have pretty bad taste in music because I just don't listen to it as much as other people. But music that I like, most of my music taste has been influenced by other media. Pretty much my main taste in music has been, I think I played Hotline Miami when I was 15, 13, when it first came out. And that game blew me away. I love Hotline Miami. It's one of my favorite games of all time. And the soundtrack was a big part of that. I love the soundtrack of Hotline Miami and Hotline Miami 2. And I just listened to those nonstop. Fell in love with synthwave, retro 80s throwback music, outrun music, specifically a lot of dark synths, which are artists like Perturbator or Dance with the Dead. I just love stuff like that. I absolutely adore synthwave music, and I really enjoyed synthwave. And then I got into future funk or city pop, Japanese funk. I don't know the exact terminology, but the sort of light poppy funk music that is currently in the background of most of my videos. And I don't know exactly where I got into that. I think it was just recommended to me by Spotify, and I just fell in love with it because it's such easy wallpaper, background listening to music, and it has such a good vibe to it. And that's mostly what I listen to music for. But I also listen to a lot of not popular music, not top 40 I don't really like, or mainstream music a lot of the time, but I listen to a lot of stuff that's very critically acclaimed or that a lot of other people recommend. So I love Death Grips. I love Dorian Electra is one of my favorite artists. I really like hyperpop a lot, though I don't listen to it as much as I probably should. I love Kendrick Lamar, and a lot of other MF Doom type rappers, but I just don't listen to them a lot. In terms of recent music that I've been listening to, I can't even really think. I love Jakey's new album. That album is absolutely amazing. I forget what it's called, Romcom. I love Romcom. I listened a lot to Romcom this year, and oh god, I can't even think of other like new albums and stuff that I've really like enjoyed because I just don't check new music out. Oh, 10,000 Gex, the new 100 Gex album came out. Fantastic, love that. I've been listening to that a lot. Absolute banger, love it a lot. But yeah, generally my taste in music is just very limited because I only listen to like background songs. But if anyone has any recommendations, I'm happy to hear it. I love to like hear people's taste and stuff, especially if it's similar to mine, because I just love hearing out new and unique genres and stuff, especially if I can like put it into a video or sort of like use it for that purpose. It's really great. Next question from Viking Robot Ninja. Serious question. What are your feelings/thoughts on the video game industry's merger and acquisition surge over the past few years? Do you think it has anything to do with the broader trend towards safe bets on known quantity IP? Bloodborne fanboy question. Axe, Cleaver, or Kane? I'll answer the Bloodborne fanboy question first. I am torn because Axe, Cleaver, and Kane all have very unique purposes and reasons why I like them. I think that the Cleaver is the most aesthetically cool weapon. It is like the Bloodborne weapon, and it's very satisfying to use. Probably the most satisfying to use. It's also like the middle of the road weapon in that sense, and I really enjoy that. My first playthrough of Bloodborne, I used the axe, and the axe is just absolutely insanely overpowered when you like upgrade it a lot. It has the most damage. It's the slowest of the three, but it is like, it hits like a truck. And if you do the two-handed L2 combo, your character spins around like a Beyblade and like kills everything on screen, and that move is like absolutely overpowered for dealing with mobs or even just regular enemies. It's got such an insanely long reach in two-handed mode. That the axe is probably the best of the three, but I do love the Cleaver. And the cane is like the coolest thing. I love the idea of like the Razor Whip cane. It's such an awesome idea. It's just such a shitty weapon. It has zero range. It doesn't do any damage. It doesn't stagger any enemies, so you can't even like stun lock them, so you just get the shit kicked out of you. I've done a run where I've played with the cane because I've done a run where I've played with like every weapon, but it's just not good, and it's really hard to justify using it, even though it's like the coolest one because it's a like sick ass cane that you're beating people with and it turns into a whip. But I'd probably have to say the Cleaver. It's the most classic choice. It's just so cool. Like I just want a Cleaver like that in real life because it just feels so sick to like swing that around. And what is my thoughts on the video game industry's merger and acquisition surge? Yeah, it's interesting because I think it was just recently where, was it the UK blocked a merger between like Microsoft and some other big IP? I'll put it up on screen because I know what it is. I just forget the exact companies that were involved. But there was basically a recent merger that was blocked by like the UK government due to like, I think anti-monopoly laws or like antitrust laws or something like that. Because every company now has realized that if they are big enough, the thing to do is just swallow up every game studio and like let them become exclusives. And I just hate it so much. Video game exclusives are such a detriment to the gaming industry as a whole because they are so anti-consumer in the way that they like section things off so you can only play Bethesda games on the Xbox or whatever. And then that's how they've been sort of operating the past few years. And I don't like stuff like that. And I think the fact that there's so many like now combo companies where it's like Activision Blizzard, it becomes so terrible because the thing that happens is that the bigger companies that are the ones acquiring others or like merging with them are the companies with the worst track record of both consumer practices and treatment of employees. Like Activision Blizzard had so many scandals regarding their fucking like sexual harassment claims and stuff like that. And then they've had anti-consumer practices with stuff like the Diablo Immortal, where you have to spend like $500,000 to fully upgrade a character. And I think that really in this case, it does need to be regulated, I guess would be the best bet, because it has gotten big enough that like you really just need to step in and prevent that stuff from being legal. Like 4 companies should not own the entire gaming industry and all be merged together into one. But yeah, that is a very good question. Void Marked asks, what is the average airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? I actually have a very funny story. When I was in my first year of college, I was a huge Monty Python type person. It's just like elitist comedy when you're really into it, which it was for me. And I remember I was with a group of like 10 people and we were all deciding on like a movie to watch in like a common lounge. And they were like, oh, let's throw on a comedy. Let's throw on something funny. And I was like, well, have you heard of this funny little indie movie, this unknown gem called Monty Python and the Holy Grail? And no one laughed the entire movie. Everyone just watched the movie in like pure silence. And then every time like a joke would come up, one of the girls in the group would just be like, oh, is that supposed to be a joke? Like they would just not even like acknowledge it. And yeah, that was like one of the cringiest moments of my life. But because I have no answer to this is a joke question, I did Google search because I'm sure some nerd found out what the average airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow is. And according to interestingengineering.com, the airspeed velocity of an unladen European swallow is about 32.4 kilometers per hour or 9 meters per second. However, some have been clocked at 74 kilometers per hour in the past. So that's the actual answer to the question that will let you cross the Bridge of Doom, or whatever it's called, Tim's Bridge. Though I'm pretty sure if you answer anything with enough confidence, you get past, because that's the joke. Yeah. Cleator. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Cleator? Don't know. What sparked your interest for video games and anime, especially for someone who has based their channel's content on these things? Yeah, I've sort of not pigeonholed myself, but I've focused on those two specifically. I do have other interests. I've considered myself a huge film nerd in the past, and I watch a lot of film related content or like television show related content. I just don't currently have an interest in making videos on stuff like that, unless it's in like the broader scope, like my upcoming Space Western video. But I do have other interests other than video game and anime. I just think video game and anime are, they're the two categories which I have the easiest time coming up with videos for and have the most passion in making videos for, but they're not like my biggest interests because I have multiple that I just don't. Like I'm a huge D&D nerd. I've been in D&D groups for forever. I just don't have any interest in making videos on D&D because I don't even know what I would talk about. What actually sparked my interest in them to begin with, I've been a video game nerd since I was 9 years old. I had a Game Boy Advanced SP when I was a kid, and I played Pokemon Fire Red until the like time marker on it was literally like 999999. And I just kept playing that game, kept playing games throughout my entire childhood. And anime I was huge into as a kid. I watched a ton of Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, a lot of all of the Cowboy Bebop. I say I haven't seen Trigun. I've watched episodes of Trigun, but just everything that would air on like Adult Swim, or I forget what the Canadian version is called, like Teletoon at night. We had a bunch of weird channels in Canada that like were our animation channels, like, you know, Toonami or Adult Swim in America. That would just air a bunch of anime, and I was super into it as a kid. I just never actually like got super into them until about college when I got back into anime and I started actually watching like new series that came out and I was like getting into it. And then specifically with the pandemic, that's when I just doubled down and like, all right, I'm going to become an anime nerd now. I'm just going to watch every big show and like create a giant watch list, go through them all. And so I'd seen a bunch of anime then, and then decided to start my channel, and then just talking about anime more and more, eventually leading to my Cowboy Bebop video, which then sort of like is the official beginning of my channel publicly right now. This next question comes from Giant Purple Pen 15. I wonder, does Patreon limit you guys in your usernames? Like what you're able to actually enter? I assume so, right? Like if you enter profanity, it doesn't let you use that as a username. I'm not saying that's what you did, obviously, but I just wonder if that's maybe a thing. Unrelated question. What proprietary game mechanics do you want to see used more often? E.g. the Nemesis system from the Shadow of / War for Mordor games, the sanity effects from Eternal Darkness, mini games from the Budokai loading screens, etc. I try not to keep track of the proprietary game mechanics. I have very little knowledge of them because I try not to think about that stuff because it's a bit depressing. But basically, yeah, the idea that companies will essentially just patent a video game mechanic or like system in their games and not let anyone use that, which is really scummy and really not good and pretty terrible, because especially the Budokai games, I remember they literally patented mini games in loading screens. So if you had a video game that had a loading screen, if you put a mini game in it, they could sue you. And that's really awful, because it seems like such a simple concept and such a simple thing to just make a game a little more fun, and you were legally not allowed to do it, which is absolutely atrocious. Because yeah, I just want to see more video games that use whatever ideas that they have. And the idea that you can limit that due to like awful corporate exploitation feels like it defeats the point of an artistic medium, right? Like, I mean, people have done this. If someone like patented a specific color of paint and no one was allowed to use that in their paintings anymore, like how awful that would be. But that's the industry we're a part of. It's run by corporations. It's terrible. Faceless XI asks, as a non-binary myself, I noticed your pronouns on Twitter are set as he/they. Is my favorite commentary person a non-binary as well, or how do you identify otherwise? Don't answer if you're not comfortable putting it out there. I'm just curious if it's yet another aspect I can appreciate about you. Love your content. Keep it up. Thank you very much. I did answer this in the replies to that comment, just a quick little answer. But essentially, yeah, it is weird that you called me a commentary channel. Do you people consider me a commentary YouTuber? I feel like I'm more of a video essayist, but I also don't like to categorize myself because I make weird videos. I guess I'm kind of commentary. It's a vague genre. Anyway, I got hung up on that. Yeah, so I replied to their comment, but I will just put it out there that like, yeah, I am my relationship, I guess you'd say, with my gender, or like how I identify myself, is a bit, I don't know, up in the air, or like a bit fluid, I guess. And I identify mostly as a male person, he, they, what masculine presenting traits, whatever you want to call it. But I do feel when I talk to non-binary people, I've known a lot of them, and hung out with a lot of people like that, and just experienced a lot of that type of stuff online. And I do relate to it to some extent. Just the idea of like, yeah, not necessarily identifying as a gender just feels kind of like comfortable to me. But I do feel like masculine sometimes. I definitely don't have any what do you call it, gender dysphoria or like anything like that towards myself, or I don't have any like uncomfortability towards presenting the way that I look, and how people like 99% of the time just associate me with being a dude because I clearly present that way. Again, not something I put too much thought into, not something I personally care too much about in regards to myself. I obviously care a lot about other people and how they want to be identified, but when it comes to myself, I really don't care how people perceive me. It's whatever. I don't have any sort of uncomfortability with that. I feel like I'm very secure in myself. I just don't think of gender as a big part of my identity, if that makes any sense. Zedcat says, do you read much manga, or is anime enough to fill your plate? I have tried to get into manga. I have, at several points in my life, gotten really into a specific manga series, or I have just been like, oh, this is the time where I'm now going to read manga. A huge part of that was the earlier part of last year. I was working at a hotel, and I was working this kind of shitty hotel job where you're just sitting around a lot of the time with like nothing to do, or like it's not a busy day, but you still have to like act like you're working, or not even act like you're working, but you just have to like fill time before you get off your shift. And with a job like that, I was like, oh, couldn't really watch anime because you still had to be present if someone would like come up and like need help, or like you needed to do some work. So I couldn't really watch shows or anything like that, or play video games. So I was like, oh, I'll read manga on my phone. And that's when I read Chainsaw Man and got really into Chainsaw Man, made my video on Chainsaw Man before the anime even came out, and got super into that. And I still keep up with Chainsaw Man because I really like the series. And I've tried to get into more. I really, of course, want to read Berserk and Vagabond and all of the big names that people throw out there. I just have not been super into manga as much as I probably should be. Another thing people talk about is One Piece. People have brought up a lot with my most recent video that I've made because it's an anime randomizer. They're like, oh, what if he got One Piece and he has to like watch all of One Piece? And I've thought about getting into One Piece, but I think if I did, I would get into the manga because one, it's much faster to read manga, which is another big appeal of why people prefer it to anime a lot of the time. There's no filler because it's the manga, it's the original source, and you can just read through chapters like way quicker than you can get through a show. I binge read all of Chainsaw Man in like 2 days because you can just blow through it if you really want to. And so I just really want to get into more series. I just already have a lot that I want to put onto my plate. I want to watch more anime. I want to play more video games, and those directly relate to YouTube and like wanting to talk about them too. So they have a bit more priority to me. Whereas I don't even think if I got super into manga, I'd want to make manga videos. And just the idea, I've talked a lot to people who make manga videos, and it's a whole lot of work. It's very different to making an anime video or the types of videos that I make. But I do want to get more into it as time goes on and like pick up series and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just, I got a lot going on. I am trying to fill my plate with as much media as possible and to add an entire other category of it. I would want to wait until I've got more room on my plate to fill. And our last question comes from one Finkey or Finkay. I'm going to assume it's Finkey. Sorry if I mispronounced it. Do you think anime has declined in quality since the 90s, or do you think it's still good overall? Only certain shows in the 90s, i.e. Neon Genesis Evangelion, Cowboy Bebop, Trigun, set such a high bar that few can beat it. Yeah, it is interesting when people talk about that, because anime in the 90s had such a distinct stranglehold on culture and had such a distinct, just like pop culture mainstream appeal. And a lot of the shows that were being made around that time were so much more complex than anything that was seen before or after for the most part. Of course, there's still shows that are being made today that I think are up to the quality of shows made in the 90s. And I think there are shows made even before the 90s that were up to that same quality. But it's those 90s shows that really stand out. And I talk about this in my Space Western video that I'm making. Basically the idea that all media of any kind, mostly science fiction, Westerns, or anything in those style, comment on their surroundings, on their current situation, and on the current issues of the time that they're made in. And I think the 90s sort of represents this crossroads where it was the turn of the millennium and there was so much stuff that was happening and so much uncertainty and so much doubt, especially in Japan at the time, because Japan was essentially going through like a massive recession. The whole period was just everyone being like quiet and reserved and like, not as positive an outlook, not having as positive an outlook on life. And so a lot of the shows made in the 90s, specifically anime, were just huge into this like introspective look at life and regret and mental illness and different like very humanistic themes and all of this stuff. Trigun, Cowboy Bebop, Neon Genesis Evangelion, they all cover these very similar themes. And even just the idea of like, this sort of like depressive mood that all of society was in. And like, there was just a lot to contemplate. And so shows made in that time were more contemplative. And modern shows don't really have that as much just because we're not in that contemplative a move. Like, we're in a better situation than we were in the 90s, especially Japan. And so it is harder, I think, to sort of create those stories that think about a lot of stuff, which is a lot of what people talk about when they talk about why the 90s anime were so good. And then you have stuff like animation studios and the way that shows are made. It's more corporate now. It's more studios like Mappa or like WIT or anything, like creating a bunch of these big shows that have like a very modern digital look to them, as opposed to the 90s shows that were very stylistic in the like sort of like hand-drawn aesthetic of them a lot of the time, like cell animation style. And I think it is partly driven by nostalgia, partly driven by the fact that like you watch a show like that and you think of the 90s, and a lot of people have very nostalgic memories to like that past. But it's also just like such a unique style that I think is hard to replicate. Though there are shows out now that just have such amazing looks to them that it's hard to argue that animation has gotten worse. It's just different now in the styles that we incorporate. So I don't think it's necessarily gone downhill. I think it's just, if you really enjoyed the type of story and the type of animation that were being used and were being told in the 90s, they don't make it like that anymore because that's a product of its time. You can't make a 90s style anime anymore because they don't have the same techniques that they used to make them. And the artists have moved on to like digital as opposed to like cell animation and all this other technique that has changed. And you can't tell a story that is like the 90s anime because the 90s anime were specifically products of their time in that they were made in a very specific period where that type of story was appealing and relevant to like current political and cultural issues. Whereas now stories are more relevant to current and political cultural issues of today. At least the greater ones are. Obviously, if you compare like trash isekai to like trash whatever 90s anime was coming out, they were both shitty, but like the good stuff is reflective of modern times, and it's much easier to look back in the 90s and say that that was good, but I think it's a lot in hindsight. So looking back on this last month, it has been not as productive as I've wanted it to be, but I've gotten a lot of important steps out of the way that I think are going to make the channel really stand out this year, and I think are going to make things a lot easier this year, and is going to get a lot more stuff out there, I think, most importantly. Basically, throughout the last month, I was thinking a lot on my workflow and my production and just a lot of stuff like that, like what I'm doing, how hard I'm working, things like that. And I've been trying to maximize the amount of effort and work that I can put into my YouTube channel and my Patreon in a healthy way, in as healthy a way as I think I can. The first of which being the major thing that I want to put out 2 videos a month. People have called me crazy for that. People, of course, comment like, oh, take your time, don't push yourself, don't do all this. I've recently done an interview where I talked with someone who is a bit taken aback with that idea, but I do want to make 2 videos a month. And that basically comes down to me thinking hard about how hard I've been working and how much I've been procrastinating mostly and wanting to try and sort of fix that. I'm a very procrastinating person. I put things off and I miss deadlines and I don't work nearly as hard as I think that I have the ability to. Even in a like, oh, don't burn out sort of sense. I am not even close to like where I would be at that point. So I want to try and push myself and I want to try and maximize the amount of work that I'm doing. And I think that 2 videos a month is a good way to do that because it puts a pressure on me to get things done. And pressure is sort of the one big motivator that I've had that is consistent. I have ADHD. I'm really bad with deadlines and like finishing stuff on time. And always what has gotten me to work the hardest has been like, oh, it's a week before the deadline. I really need to get this thing out. Finish an essay in the last 2 hours, or like do homework in the last day, or whatever it is. And so I think that after trying other things, after trying other solutions that have gotten me to try and work harder and put more videos out, because ultimately I'm unhappy with the amount of videos that I'm putting out and the amount that I'm working on them specifically. I'm not working on videos every day when this is like my full-time job now, and I want to work on it every day and put more effort into it. And so I think that committing myself to some sort of schedule for at least a little bit, it's not a permanent solution because I do work really well under pressure and I just need to manufacture that pressure because with YouTube specifically, there's nothing, there's no deadlines. If I don't make a video and I don't have a deadline that I've set for like, hey, this video is going to be out then, nothing happens. I don't have any consequences to not uploading or not working or like not being productive. And I just want to give myself consequences so that I am able to like, I guess, feel stress. I want to feel stress to put things out because that's a huge motivating factor. And it's entirely self-inflicted stress. So it's not like if I ever do feel like I'm going to get burnt out, I just stop putting out 2 videos a month. I just say, hey, I'm feeling a little burnt out. I'm not going to do this anymore. And so, yeah, I want to limit myself to 2 videos a month and we'll see how that goes for a little bit. So yeah, that's just something I want to do. I also got a lot done this month in terms of upgrading or like revamping the Patreon. The main thing being this type of like monthly video recap, update, Q&A, whatever you want to call it, series where I get to like just talk directly to everyone and tell you what's happening. I already have my posts where I update on like what video I'm working on next or like, hey, this new thing has come up or like whatever. But I just wanted a more long form way of just being able to talk to everyone here and also do a Q&A because I think that's interesting. I think Q&As are fun. And then on top of that, I'm probably not going to run the decide what I upload next poll every month, because there are probably going to be months where I have decided in advance both videos that I want to make. But any month where I'm not sure what I'm going to be making the next month, I'm probably just going to do a poll where it has just this running list of ideas that I currently have. Basically every idea I have for a video, I write in my like notes app on my phone, and I'm just going to put them up in the poll and let you guys decide basically for me, so that I can just actually start working on the video instead of like being stuck in this decision paralysis, which is another aspect of like working more. I basically want to think less, work more. Think less about how all this stuff is going to play out and like what I'm going to do and like, oh, what am I going to upload next and all that stuff. I want to remove that decision-making process and just put the axe to the grindstone and just start working on videos. Because I really want to increase my output, and not even my output. Like I don't care that much that I need to make like more videos or whatever, but I just want to work more, because YouTube is something that I have really wanted to do for forever, and it's been my dream job. And now that I have it, or that I am like focusing on it full time, I really want to actually focus on it and give it the attention and time and effort that it deserves. So that's sort of my thought process there. But yeah, that's basically it. That's my update. Everything that I'm doing this month, next month, basically everything I think I wanted to talk about here, as well as all of your questions answered. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again next month with another one of these. I'll probably be posting the next Q&A post where you can actually ask me questions in the comments sometime in the first week of May. So look out for that. Ask me anything you want there. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.